Serious? What happened in your "this is not a drill" moment during work, school etc? Was in the cafeteria at uni, but it was still pretty early, so we were nearly the only ones there. The fire alarm goes off and we assume it's a drill, so we don't move. But the alarm goes off much longer than usual. I went to check what was going on and saw the kitchen staff all going outside. Turns out there was an actual fire in the kitchen. Went back to my friends and we finally left. It was a small fire, so nothing happened, but definitely not waiting it out again. Also, once the fire alarm went off in high school, we evacuated but of course thought it was nothing. 2 first years had stuffed the toilet with toilet paper until the pipes were completely blocked. Then set the paper on fire. The fire didn't spread, but the whole hallway was filled with smoke. Needless to say, those 2 guys didn't stay in our school much longer. First, some background. I am a rocket engineer working for the ESA. Maybe you can guess what happened. I was on a business trip to one of the rocket engine factories. So they were testing a new kind of engine, and something from inside the fuel tank breaks off and goes in the engine and clogs the exhaust for a microsecond before the whole engine explodes into sparks and sharp metal pieces. This is why you test rocket stuff before you use it. I am a rocket engineer working for the ESA. That would make a great AMA. Whole campus went on lockdown due to a BB gun in the main cafeteria, followed later in the year by an evacuation due to a fire alarm short. On the first day the next year, a bomb, read, suspicious package, was in the building across the street, and we were put on lockdown again and sent to the college's gym on the other side of campus, with later in this year another lockdown happened due to a missing student. Lastly, currently doing remote learning due to COVID-19. Not me, but my girlfriend's dorm in college had to be evacuated once because someone put a hot curling iron on a wooden chair in the room. Every dorm room had them and the chair caught on fire. But thankfully the fire didn't spread and everyone was back into their rooms at about 12:25 am. Pretty short, but deal with it. When I was in year 5, 4th grade, the fire alarm set off for some reason. The students were pretty calm because they all thought it was a drill. It wasn't. The teachers were kind of scared, but wisely, they didn't tell the students that it wasn't. So everyone went out onto the playground and lined up in their year groups. My teacher went inside and went to investigate why the alarm went off. He is 6 feet 6 inches rugby player, so he was probably the best person to go in. Turns out the special kid was messing around and set it off and he was expelled. It wasn't too bad, BC, we all got like an hour of extra break. If you are reading this, Avi, thanks bro. I got a chance to trade some of my gold Moshi monsters. Mid-shower when the fire alarms went off, so I ran outside with a towel and stood there. I frocked off my entire school pretty naked. When I was a brand new cop and I got my first aggravated assault call, dispatcher called my numbers, told me code 3. I looked at my FTO, field training officer, asked him stupidity, so I go lights and sirens, and he looks at me and is like, yes, go. And off I went. Guy was an illegal immigrant from Nicaragua and was trying to murder one of his dealers. Over $20 his dealer owed. The guy had smuggling charges, other aggravated assault charges. He was a crook. Good call. Learned a lot. During the fires and featuring McMurray in 2016, we saw the smoke from our camp. Thought nothing of it. Then the radio started chirping, saying that the highway was cut off and we were stuck. One road in, one road out scenario. We helicoptered most of our crew out, with foreman staying behind on shutdown and firelock duty. Stayed there for 3 weeks during the fires. The mornings seriously looked like Silent Hill, with all the ash raining down. That must have been so scary. I remember watching the fires on the news and just being in horrified awe the way everyone had to drive through the highway with fire on both sides. My dad was scheduled to go back to work up there right when the fires happened. I'm almost a little thankful that he was on medical leave at the time. A friend of mine didn't believe me that we were under a bomb threat and got shot with a beanbag by the cops. It was very serious, but none of us, including him, couldn't stop laughing about it after the cops left. The school commenced an unexpected lockdown and then called it a drill after it was over. Most people were downright scared during the drill and some were upset afterwards. My old school went into lockdown because there was some crazy teenager with a weapon demanding things. People were talking about others running away and no one seemed to take it seriously, but then the emergency alarms went off. Some people went into classes to hide and some just left. The principal ended up going outside to face the crazed person. He gave him his watch and asked him what he would like. He then said to the person that he would be right back, asked the teenager to stay right here. He convinced him that he was going to get more expensive possessions and cash, but instead he called the police and he was arrested. A bank robber had come into our building. We share it with the bank. To rob the place. The police quickly apprehended them, but they left an explosive in a bag outside the bank, so we all had to evacuate for several hours while the bomb squad came in. We were outside for hours in December and I remember it being so windy. My poor nips. There was a fire and we always had those drills. And they say this is not a drill. But this time it wasn't a drill and nobody cared. We walked out so nonchalantly I even went back for my lunchbox and then we get out and realize the building next to ours has a fire. I knew someone would do this kind of thing with the phrase "this isn't a drill." Congratulations. Now when people hear "this isn't a drill" they won't believe it. I can't believe how people in charge can do such stupid things without thinking about the consequences. When I was in elementary school, there was a shooter threat at the high school across the street. I was in my gifted class, which was only about 5 people, and the teacher in the middle of the library. The library was connected to the office and the teacher's lounge. Because we were in the middle of the library and not visible from any of the windows or doors of the library, we did not have to turn the lights off and hide like the rest of the school did. In addition, since we were connected to the teacher's lounge, we were able to get lunch and snacks throughout the day. We got to play games, talk to each other, and just do whatever. In retrospect, we were very fortunate to get to have a fun day despite the scary situation. That's cool that things worked out like that for you. That sounds like it could have been a traumatizing experience and likely was for some students who had to hide. First real operation as a battalion surgeon with the Marines. We were in the Mojave Desert for training. About a week or so in, the desert got its one rainstorm of the summer. Was nuts. Got to really experience a flash flood and it's pretty scary. As me and my corpsmen, medics, hung out right in the aid station Quonset hut, at the ramp where our vehicles were stored, we heard a rather loud thunderclap and saw lightning. I thought for sure it was just outside the base. Turns out it wasn't, and 3 Marines were hit. 1 on top of the lav. 2 more who were touching it when it was struck. It was the first time I ever heard a real corpsman up as the Marine came sprinting through the haze of the downpour. I grabbed my med bag. I yelled for a corpsman to grab the ED and follow me. I knew exactly where it was going to be. I sprinted because my adrenaline was pumping. I learned that day even in decent shape it's hard to sprint past 400 meters unless you train for it, especially carrying gear. I still had a few hundred meters left once I finally got gassed and had to rather sheepishly jog up to the huge circle of Marines loading up the casualties. The one that wasn't responsive got brought back to my aid station to stabilize before they drove him to the hospital. Fortunately he was just unconscious and was otherwise stable, so we shipped him out pretty quick. All 3 guys did fine. The one on top had the worst injuries to his back and that was just from falling off the top of the lav. Moral of the story: don't sprint if you can't see the finish line. I was taking care of something in the Social Security office when the fire alarm went off. Unfortunately I had my fair share of false alarms, which clouded my reaction. The clerk also said it was a false alarm, and we kept going. Only when security came to evacuate we took it seriously. A small fire had begun on the floor above us. I thanked him and went to my car. That made my blood pump. When I was in the army, one time air raid sirens started blaring in the base. The 2 female soldiers that were in the building with me started panicking and I, thinking it was just a system test, started messing with them by shouting commands. The whole duck and cover thing. After a few seconds of me giggling while they were hiding under a desk, I started hearing explosions. The day before I had a half-day pass and went home. Turns out that while I was enjoying a bit of time off, tensions with the northern border got real bad and some crap started happening in the area. But I didn't know any of it because I didn't consume any news in my time off. So now I'm beginning to panic because this building is made of drywall and asbestos. So I grabbed the girls and we dashed to the nearest bunker. 1. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and Kansas is known for tornadoes and one happened during lunchtime. 2. Idiot started a fire with a couple of cigarettes in the schoolboy's bathroom. 3. I used to take these courses during the summer at a local college when my family moved to Florida when I was around 12, and apparently there was this one guy who had robbed a store and crashed his truck on the bridge that's right outside the school. He got out and ran, but he didn't make it far before his arrest. I had just finished a PE class and had returned to the changing area. Decided to have a shower before next class. Didn't hear it to begin with. Carried on as normal, then heard the booming voice from the teacher yelling at us that this wasn't a practice but an actual fire alarm. Ended up mustering with a towel wrapped round my middle, nothing else. Middle of a freezing December afternoon. Snow on the ground amongst the other 200 odd kids. Took about half an hour for the alarm to be classed as spurious in the fire brigade to check and clear the school. Once in school, we were going through classes normally when the fire alarm goes off, but since it's early in the year everyone thinks it's a drill. But it might as well have been a drill since it was a small fire in the science class which was put out easily, and not even in the school but in a portable. Upside though, I got to see a real praying mantis. Though it did catch me by surprise cause it took me a while to realize it was there even though I was standing right next to it. Some kid apparently brought a gun to school and classes had to be let out one by one. There was probably 12 cop cars outside when I was leaving campus. Apparently there was supposed to be some sort of blacks versus Mexicans fight after school. It wasn't even a gang heavy school though, and we lived in the suburbs. In reality, it was probably just a couple groups of wannabes trying to intimidate each other, and one person took it way too far. I heard that after all the cop stuff, they rescheduled to meet up at a nearby park and do it there, but nothing ever came of it. I worked in an office attached to a complex of warehouses and production plants. One day I was out working on something in another area of the campus, and when I got back the offices seemed strangely empty and there was an odd smell. Someone came through doing a check and told me to book it out of there because the frozen food warehouse next door had a leak in the anhydrous ammonia cooling system. We had an earthquake in the middle of school. I was in elementary school. No one thought it was an earthquake at first, since the slight shaking felt like the kids coming back up the stairs from lunch, but then it got stronger and I was the first one to notice the change. I scream earthquake and everyone gets under their desks. It was a real scary time for me, but luckily the school didn't fall over and everyone was alright. The fire alarm went off and we all went outside, wondering what could have happened and if there's a fire somewhere in the building. We were all very calm since there were more than enough escape routes and emergency exits in the buildings to use even if there was a fire somewhere, so we weren't really worried about our colleagues. We were just speculating what caused the alarm to go off, if there was a fire and where the fire could be since it was a pretty big building with 3 floors. For context, out of the 1.600 total employees, 970 worked in that building. After the fire department showed up, it turned out someone managed to make the fire alarm go off by microwaving something that shouldn't be microwaved. For context, I worked at a federal agency in Germany at the time, so I didn't expect someone to cause the fire alarm go off by not knowing how to properly microwave something. An outside contractor deleted a production database, over 1 billion records, while running some tests. The whole facility was fricked for the next week while we restored the data from tape. Lots of complications followed. The mistake cost the company several million. When I was in grade 9 we had 2 lockdown drills, one each semester, only to find out that it wasn't a drill either time. I don't really know what happened the first semester aside from I was stuck under a desk, but during the second semester I had gym class outside when it was cold. We have a storage shed beside the football field where we were and that's where the 2-3 classes, I don't remember the exact number, this was almost 5 years ago, were told to hide. We were all scared and cramped and claustrophobic. There were quite a few panic attacks and we only had 1 water bottle to go around as a drink. We were in there for about an hour before we were let out. We found out afterwards that down the street someone had threatened someone else with a knife and then the cops had to deal with a hostage situation because of it. In first grade the fire alarm went off when it was not a drill. Basically we had to wait 2 hours outside in late May until the fireman told us it was okay to go back inside. It ended up being a special needs kid who pulled the fire alarm. I was chilling at a cafe on campus when a friend suddenly texts me, "Stay inside. Don't go out no matter what." And I was like, what? Why? Some lunatic in a van is trying to run over students. He's loose on. Names a spot a few meters from my cafe. Trying to plow into crowds, holy crap. No one was hit fortunately. There was police tape all over when I came out and there was a dented car piece in the middle of the road. I had a client come in for her nail appointment and she brought her 4-year-old grandson, who she totally ignored the whole time. He always brought toys to entertain himself. I had told her repeatedly, but politely, that my nail salon is not the place for children because of chemicals and I wouldn't be able to give her, the client, my full attention during the service. The boy decides to eat some hard candy. He's standing behind grandma. I look up and he's clutching his throat and turning blue. I got out of my chair, performed the Heimlich. He promptly projectile vomited and I got to clean that up. I sat back down and grandma just looks obliviously up at me and says, "Something wrong? What did he do?" That's when I demanded she never bring her grandkid back to my salon. Used to be a phlebotomist in a small office connected to a doctor's office. I wasn't present for this incident, but hearing about it was really unsettling. At that location, there'd be one person who worked 7A4P, and the other would work 8A5P. One of the folks working that day was afloat, so they'd put her where they needed extra staff. Sometimes she would be at a location with a co-worker or two. A lot of times she would work at single staff locations, alone. She was drawing a patient's blood when our co-worker, who was manning the front desk just before he was to leave for the day, heard her call his name. Kind of growled. He walked into the room and saw her sitting on the floor in front of the patient, who still had the needle in his arm, holding it himself and looking very concerned for the phlebotomist. Co-worker got the needle taken care of and the patient bandaged up, then looked at our float who had called his name and saw that one side of her face had gone slack. He ran next door to get a doctor and MA. They called 911. She was having a massive stroke mid-blood draw. Patient was not injured during the procedure. Our co-worker lived and continued on to recovery. The last time I saw her, she wasn't able to walk or form coherent words, but was making progress. Very scary for everyone involved. Had she been at a single staff location, who knows what could have happened. On a Friday afternoon we were called in for an emergency meeting that we might be teaching via distance learning just in case things got worse. We expected we'd close a day or two maybe. We didn't come back to school after that. 7 weeks later over 21,000 people have died in my state. 28 days ago I had a guy that I just called to remove some junk from my garage and he drove around my cul-de-sac leaving and coming around he hit a parked car and then parked right in front of my house blocking my driveway to call his wife and tell her what happened and get insurance info. I hung around enough to ask him if he needed anything and expressed my sorrow for him hitting the parked car. His words were slightly slurred and then turned almost unintelligible. He muttered that his face was numb. I immediately knew this was not a drill and that he was probably having a stroke. He started vomiting and couldn't really say much by then as I called 911 and told them that I believe this man is having a stroke and to hurry. They were there. About 8 minutes and the dispatcher made me in the meantime ask him to look at me and smile to see if his smile was symmetrical. It wasn't even close. Then asked if he could put both of his arms in the air. He couldn't but he was in a truck. Then asked me to have him repeat a quick rhyme. Once more he could not. Then paramedics and fire showed up at the same time and started helping him and I asked if he was having a stroke and he said that he is absolutely having a stroke. And they left in a hurry to the hospital. FF to today almost a full month later and he has been picked up by his wife this very morning to go to rehab and hasn't seen his wife, which I have been in touch with since the first day, the whole time because of COVID-19. This is a very much so loved man by his family, a 21-year retired master sergeant in the military and I pray that he gets well and rehabilitation from his stroke. On a side note, this man's son came out to my house later that same day to make sure that we were okay and to see if his dad left anything undone in the emergency. Such a fine young man of about 20 years old to be so sensitive and caring about others in his father's time of need. Very much so a salute to this loved father that raised such a special young man. I love this so much. Good job. Props to dispatch and the man's son, too. Sitting in my apartment in Japan on the 11th of March, 2011. Ground starts shaking. Doesn't stop. The Japanese people around me start freaking out. That's how I knew it wasn't a normal earthquake. In elementary school there was a bomb threat at one of the 6 schools in my town. 4 elementary, 1 private, 1 middle school, high school in the same building. When I was in elementary school, the high school got out before us. 2 students thought it was a good idea to come to our school and shoot paintballs at each other. The school had a lockdown. Every police officer from the small town came, and for some reason they needed a helicopter. I'm train crew. Took part in a train-to-train evacuation in the very early hours of the morning, around 2 AM. The service in front of us had struck and killed someone. Usually the scene would be cleared and the train would move onwards once a relief driver is found, but the unit had been damaged and they just couldn't get it moving or coupled up to anything else to shift it. Meanwhile our service was held back as insurance. We got held at Retford for maybe 3 hours or so and then got the go-ahead to move alongside and prepare to assist with a full controlled train evacuation. Man, stuff like this doesn't happen. You get maybe 1 train evacuation happen every 10 years as it's such a rare occurrence. So I with the rest of the crew aided passengers up the ladders. Yup, ladders from the door down to track level. There was maybe 150 on the broken down train and it took hours to get them all safely across. Total professional job. No complaints and we got everyone on the move. I'll never see anything like that again, but I'm glad to have experienced it and take part in something on that scale. School lockdown my freshman or sophomore year in high school. We all thought it was a drill. Nope. Some kid during Wood's class sharpened a piece of wood and shanked another kid. Same thing happened at another school the same day. Apparently the 2 shankers were dealing drugs and the 2 shankies had screwed them over, so they planned to teach them a lesson. Working with my dad. Asked me to hold the flashlight while he was working. Asked me to bring the drill for him. And I didn't know what tool was that. Ended up coming back with his circular saw. This is not a drill, he said. Would be good, but somebody already did this joke. So first there was an actual drill and everyone in my school went outside for about 5 minutes or so. Then 30 minutes later when everyone is back inside. So second year, like 14 I think, decided to go for a smoke in the bathroom. Only to set off the smoke alarms again. After yet another 5 cold wet minutes outside, everyone headed back inside only to immediately go back outside because someone's food in the home ec room went on fire because they didn't turn it off when leaving the room. I was in Spanish class. A kid had gone to use the restroom a little bit ago, and when he eventually came back, he burst through the doors with his hand up in a fake pistol yelling, "I have a gun." He was the class clown and we all knew he was joking, of course, so nobody, but even the teacher, thought much of it. He apparently didn't think that it was possible for the classes neighboring us could hear it, who didn't know it was a joke. It sent the school into a mini lockdown for a while that was supposed to not be a drill, though everyone in the class knew that there was never any threat. When we were exposed to benzines for a bit, when we heard a nearby plant explode, and when the massive plant across the street from our plant had a fire near explosives. We had an actual fire at my school once and none of the students took it seriously for a while till the teachers were screaming about an electrical fire that started in a classroom. Then we hurried our asses up, lol. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.